Apparently everyone is on the joke, or I've been living under a rock. So I'm sorry if any of this is redundant, but I have to reach out because things have gotten really out of hand. I think the first time I encountered Mr. Strangeteeth was the day I called my cousin Greg a liar. This was, 3-ish years ago. I was at a family reunion in the Outer Banks. Grandma booked a spot right off the beach, but it rained like the whole week. Some cousins and I got bored, so we decided to drive into town. We'd come in from the north, and the whole landmass is basically one big strip. So we piled in Becky Ann's and Cyrus's cars and drove south. It was terrible driving weather, and we were all laughing in the back, so none of us blamed my brother for taking a wrong turn. To be honest, we didn't really think you could. It's a straight road up and down. Beach on the left, beach on the right. But what did we know? We didn't live there. My sister's car stayed on the right road because she and the 3 cousins inside were no longer in sight. I remembered Ren was in the passenger seat, so I called her up. "Where are you guys?" I asked. "We're still on the road. Where are you?" "I thought that's where we were too." I lowered my phone and called up to Kate, who was trying to get the GPS to cooperate. "Any idea yet?" "Not really," she said, pressing down hard on the screen. "Okay, well, if we see anything cool, we'll text you guys," she said. "Otherwise, we'll see you back at the house." At least, I think that's what she said, because the call was dropped and wouldn't reconnect. Our car ended up on this tree-lined road where all the plants looked like they weren't supposed to be there. And it's not like they were magically adapting to this climate. They all looked sick. I think I even saw a cactus in the ground, but I was distracted when Liz said she saw a town through the trees. We thought she was joking at first, but Kate saw it too, so Cyrus turned the car down the first side road he could see. So Liz was kind of right. It wasn't a town, it was more like a bunch of shops connected together on stilts in case of flooding. Not uncommon. Most of the stuff we had seen in the Outer Banks was built like that. There were only a couple of other cars in the lot, but it was a sign of civilization at least, and that's really all we were looking for. Kate said she'd stay in the car to figure out how to get back. Cyrus offered to stay with his fiancée, but she said that was fine. He could text her if there was anything worth checking out. The details might not seem important to you, but they feel crucial to me. I've turned the events over and over in my head again. Who was where, who did what, and how it could have turned out differently. I think I'm lucky. So there were 3 of us. Cyrus, Liz, and me, who ended up darting through the rain to the shops. We wandered from window to window under the long blue roof. "Everything's closed," Cyrus said. Liz pressed her forehead to the windows as we walked along the white wooden planks. At least I assume they once were all white. Most of the paint had stripped away. Cyrus jumped up and down on the wooden walk. "It feels like it's gonna break," he said. I scowled. "Then don't do that." But I jumped on the beams too. He was right. "Yeah, this feels really old." I looked up and saw Liz had gone off ahead. She was looking in one of the last windows. "Is that the end?" I shouted. I wanted to leave. The rain was leaking through the roof and the wind was pushing it sideways onto us. I felt the soggy wood was about to give way. I kept thinking about landing on a misplaced cactus. Yeah, I think, whoa! Liz jumped away from the window like someone had pulled on the back of her shirt. "What?" "Someone's in there." "It's open?" "I guess." She waved at me. So obviously we had to go check it out. I can't remember what the store's name was on the sign, but I remember thinking it was something pretty normal for the area, like Sadie's Treasures or whatever. The store was full of the same nautical knickknacks we'd seen everywhere else. The same shirts that said things like OBX Life and Don't Touch Me, I'm a Mermaid. But the shelves behind the counter were full of glass candy jars. The counter had hollowed out spaces for displays, but there weren't any treats on the shelves. As we entered the store, this hot, stifling smell surrounded us. The woman behind the counter didn't seem bothered by it. "Hi, kids," she said. "We're almost 30, but when we said hello, we sounded like children. Where are you from?" I didn't want to tell her, and apparently neither did Liz or Cyrus. Liz mumbled, "New York?" "Oh, fun," the woman said. The woman had this, bizarre manic aura. She stood like she was sitting back on her hips. She never showed her teeth. When she talked, her arms sat on the counter like they were heavy. Her eyes were covered in smudged mascara. I couldn't read what was on her faded black t-shirt. Her hair was knotted back with 2 pieces of twine into large, messy knots. I wondered why her store was the only one open today, and then I felt kind of bad for her. But the 3 of us averted our eyes and started wandering around the shop until it felt like we had done our time and could leave. I looked at the candies behind the woman's head. Some of them were melted into total mush. They kind of looked like preserves, but completely rotten. I would explain the smell, but doesn't the Outer Banks specialize in seafood? Not peaches or whatever. Liz scrolled on her phone. She said to me quietly, "I can't check in." "On Foursquare?" "Yeah, I can't find it listed." Weird. I was staring off into space when Liz and Cyrus said, "Thank you, thanks," and drifted towards the door. We were almost out. Almost. "Do you want to try a sample?" We turned around. She had a spoon in her hand with some kind of crunchy brown thing on it. "It's Sweet Tooth. We make it here. Try some." Cyrus said no, and no one was surprised. He was never big on candy. I took a piece. "Is it vegan?" Liz asked. The woman looked at Liz and then at the piece of candy, and I was wondering if the woman knew what being vegan was or if she had any idea what was actually in the candy, even though she said they made it at the store. "Sure," she said. That's okay, thanks," Liz said. I think the way Liz and Cyrus were side-eyeing the candy made me want to try it more so I could reaffirm myself as the crazy one in the bunch. And I did. I put it in my mouth, and it was the texture of undercooked popcorn, but it tasted sort of chocolate cinnamony. And there was this other flavor, this rich quality to it that can only be described as being like meat juice. But it wasn't bad exactly. It was just strange, like tasting barbecue crickets for the first time. I bought a bag of it. Liz and Cyrus stared at me, so I told them the others will never believe this unless we bring something back. Cyrus joked that if we were going to bring them back strange candy, then they better at least be getting us Starbucks from the actual town we were looking for. We drove back up the road, and it was strange again how it was like we were supposed to have gone there. I mean, I was really thinking at this point that it was Becky Ann who took the wrong turn. On the way back, Liz called up Ren, and she said they're already heading back to the house because there really just wasn't much to see around that part, like a Harris Teeter or something. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I saw reception had come back for me too. I had a Snapchat from Brittany of their group with 2 trays of Starbucks. We got back to the house and went up to this loft space away from our parents so we could talk about where we'd been. I pulled out the bag of candy and showed them. It didn't have any nutrition facts or anything, just a branding stamp and a piece of masking tape to hold it closed. Ren, Becky Ann, Brittany, and Greg were all on the verge of trying it until I described what it tastes like. I didn't say that my stomach felt weird because I thought it was car sickness, but in retrospect, I don't think it was. They were all hesitating when we were called downstairs for dinner, and we forgot about it for the rest of the night. caught up in games and gossip and food comas. Around 11, we broke out our liquor stash, so we weren't exactly in the headspace for trying strange candy. We were more interested in the cold pizza in the basement. The next day was sunny, so we actually swam a bit. After the post-swim showers, we were all looking for something to do that didn't take much brain power. We ended up outside on the prickly grass with the bag of candy. Liz and Brittany wouldn't go into the grass because there were burrs in it, and they'd both gotten pricked before, so they sat on the cobblestone driveway. Cyrus didn't want to eat the candy, but he was all for throwing it around. I volunteered the bag because it was overstuffed and I still felt sick, and now I was suspecting the candy. So we all started tossing it up in the air to catch it in our mouths. Kate joined Liz and Brittany in trying to take goofy, artsy pictures of us mid-throw. Ren ran up the balcony that faced the driveway. She wanted to try to get a bird's eye view with her cannon. For the best mid-air shot, Ren would shout, 1, 2, 3, go, and we'd toss. So it was Greg, me, Becky Ann, and Cyrus in a square, tossing the candies up and across and laughing when the weird globs hit our faces. Cyrus would spit out the candy if he caught it in his mouth. Becky Ann pulled off a small piece to try it, but she was not about it, so she started spitting out her successes too. Greg said it was alright, and he would eat the ones he caught, although I wondered if he was just saying that because most people didn't like it. Ren started laughing hysterically from the balcony. We kept asking, What? So he ran down to show us the picture. While Ren was coming down, the others pulled up their pics from the last round to see if they caught anything that was as funny. Liz's picture ended up at the sky. Kate's had taken before we had tossed, and Brittany had been clearing some memory on from her phone. We looked at Ren's picture. Becky Ann pointed at the picture and said, Whoa, Greg, from the way it blurred, it looks like you have 2 sets of teeth. Exactly, Ren said. We were all kind of laughing because it totally did look like that. Our mouths were all gaping open and everything was in focus except for his mouth and jaw. Greg wasn't laughing. He kept asking Ren about the picture, if she was sure it was the last one she took, but Ren said yes, it was. And she pulled up the details, and the timestamp was right. And then Greg made us all shut up. He said, That can't be the last picture you took. I dropped my candy. I was bending down when you took it. I guess you can imagine what the conversation was after that, which wasn't much of a conversation. It was all of us assuming that someone was wrong or someone was joking around, and then finally we landed on maybe he was lying. Lying just to be creepy and weird because we were bored and we all kind of liked stuff like that. But it broke out into an argument until we were called in by our parents to help with dinner. And for the rest of the trip, we didn't talk about it anymore because it was really tense and we were out there to have a good time. You can have a stupid blow up over a stupid thing with your friends, but you have to be a little more careful with your family. There's a certain point on the Richter scale where it would become a part of a family lore. And it was hot out and we were hungry and we'd all been eating too many ice cream bars and drinking too little water. So we were thankfully just all old enough to know when to quit. I hid the bag of candy, what remained of it, in my suitcase. I felt bad, like weirdly ashamed, because I was the one who bought the candy. It was like we were yelled at after having fun, but didn't really know why. I also blamed some of Greg's and my bad moods on the candy. My stomach really felt nauseous consistently for the rest of the trip. I thought that was the end of it. We all left the beach house. We went home. Then Greg was in the hospital. His mouth had been hurting, Liz told me. It got worse the week after we got back. He went to the dentist, and they said it might be a root canal. They took some tests, but he couldn't sleep. He was in so much pain, he went to the ER. They kept him there. All of his teeth were infected. His gums were in terrible shape. Root canals in every tooth, when he'd been fine before. Clean bill at the last dentist appointment. It was almost a year before he could have solid food again. When I heard this had happened, my mind immediately went to the candy. My mouth felt fine, but my stomach was still in bad form. I pulled the bag of candy out of my suitcase and immediately knew that it had been a mistake to even pack it. It smelled bad, like it had in the shop we bought it from. Then I noticed a stamp on the bag. I thought it was the store's logo or the name of the candy, but it said in a little red circle, Mr. Strangeteeth. And I thought that was weird because that definitely wasn't the name of the store, though I had a hard time remembering what the store was called. And the candy wasn't called that. She called it Sweet Tooth, so who was Mr. Strangeteeth? So I spent a good long while lying on my couch in an awkward position staring at Google Maps trying to find that business location in the Outer Banks. But I doubted that it would be there, since I remembered lists said it wasn't on Foursquare. And then I looked at Google Earth, but I just saw a lot of trees that were even taller than the ones that we had seen before. So even if the unusual plants were there, the tops of the taller trees were probably covering them, as well as the road. And then at some point, it just wouldn't zoom in further, which I guess makes sense because you can't expect the Google truck to be exactly everywhere. I mean, if Google trucks make Google Maps, then who tells them where to go? I pulled out some souvenir placement maps of the Outer Banks, and I didn't see any landmark that sounded like it encompassed the shop. So I kind of gave up, but when I showed the candy to my roommate and the stamp on the bag, my stomach almost dropped when she said, "Oh yeah, I've heard of Mr. Strangeteeth." She can't remember where she heard of him from, or even if he is a he, or if he is the name of the store or brand. But I felt a little sad, like some mystery and adventure had been taken away. But then the next day I didn't feel sad anymore. I just felt curious. So I typed Mr. Strangeteeth into Google, and I got a few results. But the results didn't seem to have very many descriptions, and they led to non sequiturs or error 404 pages. So then I started getting weirded out. I would text people I knew if they had heard of Mr. Strangeteeth, and they would say yes. But it was the same deal. They would not know where they had heard of him from, or what he was. And if I said, "Does he have anything to do with candy?" some of them would say, "Oh, maybe," but most of them said, "No, I don't think so." And then I called some souvenir shops in Outer Banks, ones we'd been to earlier during the trip, and I said, well, I was trying to find the location there, and I would mention the name Mr. Strangeteeth, and they would say, yeah, maybe they'd heard of him. Until finally one person transferred me to another person who transferred me to another person, and I stayed on the line, and I wasted too much time, but in the end it was worth it because they said they knew who he was. They said they knew Mr. Strangeteeth. That was the nickname of a local man who had jumped from the balcony while he was staying at his beach house. The storyteller didn't remember which house it was, but she remembered the story because it was a small town, and any time an ambulance goes through there, everybody sees it. It was a bright sunny day, which was weird. I didn't picture it being a sunny day because for some reason I don't picture bad things happening in the daytime. But she said it was a bright sunny day and he jumped from one of the balconies on the house. No one's really sure of his motivations. They assumed it was to try to kill himself, but he didn't die. He got up. His face had hit a rock, so his forehead and eyes were basically intact and his nose was a little bruised, but mostly his teeth. His teeth and his jaw were completely wrecked, and he landed on one of his arms, just one. Like he only put one of his arms out to catch his fall while the other fell slack behind him. So his elbow bent backwards completely. And a lot of people saw this happen, and a lot of them kids who saw the blood hanging from his mouth, all of his teeth gone or at jagged angles. And then he walked onto his front porch and he just sat there. He sat there until somebody called an ambulance. Many people saw this happen, but I don't know why that story spread around, especially because no one seems to know where he is, if he did exist, and I don't know why that thing with Ren's camera happened or the candy shop. I don't know how it's connected, or maybe it isn't, and all of that was just my brain trying to remember something everybody else also knows. But mostly I feel like I've been left out of this. So if you've heard of him, you can say that you've heard of him. And if you haven't, then that's fine. I mean, maybe I'll feel a little less alone, but probably I'll just not believe you. Somehow everyone knows him except for me. Or I guess I was the last to find out. I mean, it was 2-3 years ago that I found the candy. Maybe the woman said it was called Strangeteeth, and I heard wrong, or misremembered Mr. Strangeteeth. It's just an urban legend I managed to never hear. I don't know why it matters that I feel so out and so alone. I don't know how that makes a difference in my life now. You know, I still have the candy. I don't know why there's a part of me that hopes that it destroys me. But if it does, maybe I'll just sit on the porch, letting myself fall apart in plain sight of everyone, until somebody calls an ambulance and takes me away.